Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Sometimes, it's the smallest moments that change the course of everything we thought we knew. Today, we're diving into a story of love, loss, self-discovery, and the path to healing. It's about two people, once bound by a shared past, who find themselves navigating their own journeys, alone yet not without purpose. Meet Lucas and Olivia, two individuals who once shared a dream, a life, a love. But as life often does, it threw obstacles in their way, leading them down separate paths. This is the story of how they both found the courage to move forward, rebuild, and ultimately discover something even more meaningful than they ever imagined. Their story may have started with pain, but it's what comes next that matters the most. So, what happens when you've lost everything you thought you needed, only to find that the most important thing was within you all along? Let's find out together. Lucas Harper had always considered himself a simple man. A high school teacher, he found joy in shaping young minds, guiding them through the turbulent years of adolescence. His life with Olivia, his wife of 5 years, had been stable, perhaps even too stable. Olivia, on the other hand, was a rising star in the marketing world. Ambitious, driven, and always on the move, she had the kind of career that demanded constant attention. But for Lucas, who valued the simple pleasures of life, the balance between their professional lives had always seemed harmonious. That is, until Olivia prepared for her trip to San Francisco. She was attending a prestigious marketing conference, a trip she had been excited about for weeks. However, as she packed her bags the night before her departure, Lucas noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. Her usual carefree attitude had been replaced with an almost preoccupied air. Her phone buzzed incessantly, but she'd quickly silence it whenever he walked by. She spent hours on the phone, and when he asked about it, she dismissed it with a forced smile, brushing it off as work-related. Lucas tried to ignore it. They had been through ups and downs before, and maybe this was just a particularly busy time for her. Yet, deep inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had known Olivia for years, and the woman packing for this trip was not the same person he had married. It all started with a strange message. Lucas had just returned from a meeting at school when he saw the notification on his phone. The text was anonymous, the number unfamiliar, but the message was clear: Olivia isn't being honest. Check her calendar for a surprise. At first, Lucas thought it was a prank, someone trying to stir trouble. But the message kept him up that night. It gnawed at him. He decided to do what any curious husband would do: he checked her phone. What he found only fueled his growing concern. On her calendar, Olivia had listed her business trip to San Francisco, but there was no mention of the conference she had told him about. Instead, there was a private meeting with someone named Aaron Price, a senior executive at her company who Lucas had heard of, but never met. That's when Lucas decided to check the list of conference attendees. He scrolled through it for a few minutes and found that Olivia's name was missing. This wasn't a coincidence. Something was off. He made a mental note to check with Olivia once she got home. The next day, after Olivia had left for her trip, Lucas spent more time going through her things. He found a piece of paper on her desk, a note from Aaron Price. It was heartfelt, even romantic, expressing a desire for something more than just professional. "I think we make a great team," it said. "Let's explore what's next for us." Lucas's stomach churned. This wasn't just a friendly colleague reaching out. This was personal. His mind raced, and he felt the familiar feeling of betrayal creep into his chest. Desperate for answers, Lucas reached out to his best friend, Ethan, a tech-savvy investigator. Ethan had always been there for him, through thick and thin. Lucas asked him to help track Olivia's whereabouts using her phone's GPS. A few hours later, Ethan called with the news Lucas dreaded. "She's at the Silver Palm Resort, Lucas. And, she's not alone." With his heart pounding in his chest, Lucas grabbed his keys and drove with Ethan to the resort. The drive felt endless, but he knew he had to face the truth, no matter how painful. When they arrived, Lucas's legs felt heavy as they walked into the upscale hotel lobby. They didn't need to search long. A hotel employee confirmed that Olivia and Aaron had checked in together. Lucas's gut twisted as he approached the room. They knocked on the door, and when Olivia opened it, her face paled. Aaron was standing behind her, his face too calm, too collected. "Lucas," Olivia said, her voice faltering. "What are you doing here?" "Don't play games, Olivia," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "I know what's going on." Olivia's eyes dropped to the floor, and Aaron made no attempt to hide his discomfort. Lucas's voice grew firmer. "I want both of you to sign a confession, right here, right now. Acknowledge what you've done." Olivia hesitated, and then, as the weight of the situation settled in, she signed without saying a word. Aaron followed suit, but Lucas could see the indifference in his eyes. He wasn't sorry. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed broken, though she still tried to explain her actions. "I never meant for this to happen," she said quietly, almost pleading. It just happened." Lucas's jaw tightened. He could see the vulnerability in her eyes, but he didn't feel pity. Only anger. Only betrayal. He left the room without saying another word. The confrontation didn't end there. Lucas, in a moment of clarity and fury, decided to expose the truth to the world. He went live on his social media and broadcasted the entire confrontation. The video spread like wildfire, and soon, everyone knew about Olivia and Aaron's affair. The fallout was swift. Olivia was suspended from her job, and Aaron's career took a hit as well. Their relationship crumbled under the weight of the public's judgment. As the news spread, Lucas received messages of support from friends, colleagues, and even some of his students. In contrast, Olivia found herself isolated. The community she once belonged to turned its back on her. She faced relentless judgment from those around her, and her career, once on an upward trajectory, came to a screeching halt. Months passed, and Lucas began to rebuild his life. His integrity had earned him the respect of everyone who knew him. But it wasn't just about reputation. Lucas knew he had to find his own peace. He focused on his work, dedicating himself to teaching and mentoring his students. One day, out of the blue, Lucas received an offer to teach at an esteemed private school in a different city. The offer was a fresh start, a new beginning. After much contemplation, Lucas accepted. He moved away, eager to leave behind the painful memories and start a new chapter. Meanwhile, Olivia's journey was far from over. She found herself alone, lost in her own regrets. She reached out to Lucas, hoping for some kind of reconciliation, but he refused. He knew that the person she was before the betrayal, wasn't the woman he had fallen in love with. He had to move forward, and so did she. As the years went by, Lucas found a renewed sense of purpose in his new job, growing as a teacher and as a man. He learned that life, though filled with pain and uncertainty, always offers a second chance if you're willing to take it. Olivia, too, struggled. But with time, she enrolled in therapy, worked on her personal growth, and gradually rebuilt her career. The community had long since moved on, but Olivia was determined to change. She knew the road ahead would be hard, but at least now she understood the true cost of betrayal. As the story closed, Lucas stood outside his new school, watching the sunset. His future was bright, and his past, though painful, had led him to this place of peace. Olivia, on the other hand, was still facing her past. But life, as they both learned, was all about moving forward. As the months went by, Lucas settled into his new life. The prestigious school in a quiet town offered him a fresh start, both professionally and personally. He found solace in his work and made meaningful connections with colleagues and students who admired his integrity. Lucas began to realize that while the scars of his past would never fully fade, he was stronger for having survived them. His classroom became a place not just for academic growth but for emotional healing. He inspired his students to strive for excellence while teaching them the importance of honesty and character. They respected him not only for his intelligence but for the strength he showed in the face of adversity. One particular student, Emily, a shy and reserved teenager, caught Lucas's attention. She reminded him of himself when he was younger, unsure, seeking direction, and burdened by insecurities. Over time, Lucas became her mentor, guiding her through academic and personal struggles. Emily confided in him about her own difficulties at home, and Lucas did his best to support her. Through this bond, Lucas began to find purpose again. He wasn't just teaching, it felt like he was helping someone heal, just as he had healed himself. Yet, while Lucas's life was moving forward, the past remained present in the quiet moments. He would occasionally find himself reflecting on his marriage to Olivia, the betrayal, and how it had reshaped his understanding of trust and love. Despite the hurt, he couldn't help but wonder what it would have been like if things had turned out differently. But he knew there was no use dwelling on the past. It was time to embrace the future, whatever it held. Meanwhile, Olivia's road to redemption was far from easy. After losing her job and being publicly humiliated, she had nowhere to turn but inward. She found herself alone, living in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, far from the world she had once known. The luxury, the social circles, and the prestige, everything was gone. But rather than spiraling further into despair, Olivia decided to confront her mistakes head-on. She enrolled in therapy, something she had never done before, and began to understand the root of her actions. Her affair with Aaron had been a symptom of deeper issues of self-worth, ambition, and a desperate need for validation. Slowly but surely, Olivia began to rebuild her life. She started volunteering at a local shelter, helping people who had been through their own struggles. The work was difficult, but it gave her a sense of purpose. It was the first time in years that she felt like she was making a meaningful difference in someone else's life. She also took up writing, documenting her journey of self-discovery. Writing became her therapy, her release, and she began to realize that she needed to forgive herself before she could expect others to do the same. Olivia's reputation remained tarnished, and people still whispered about her past mistakes. But she didn't mind as much anymore. She had learned that true redemption came from within. No amount of external approval could heal her heart, only her own willingness to change could do that. One crisp autumn afternoon, while Lucas was strolling through the town's central park, he unexpectedly ran into Olivia. Their eyes met across the pathway, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. The last time they had seen each other was in that hotel room, with everything falling apart. Olivia looked different now, softer, more genuine. She seemed older, but in a way that spoke to growth rather than defeat. She approached him cautiously, her footsteps tentative. "Lucas," she said, her voice uncertain, but not without sincerity. "I didn't expect to see you here." Lucas studied her for a moment. He could see the woman standing before him wasn't the same person who had betrayed him all those months ago. Still, the memories of their past loomed large between them. "I didn't expect to see you either," Lucas replied, his voice even, though there was a trace of hesitation. Olivia took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to speak. "I just wanted to thank you, for not giving up on me. I know I don't deserve it, but your refusal to forgive me made me realize just how much I needed to change." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. He had long accepted that forgiveness was a personal journey, not a gift given lightly. "I'm not sure I can forgive you, Olivia," Lucas said softly. "But I'm glad to see that you're trying. I hope you find what you're looking for." Olivia nodded, tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't say anything else. She knew that her redemption would not be defined by Lucas's forgiveness, nor by the approval of others. It was a journey she had to take alone. As they stood there, the weight of the years between them was palpable. But for the first time in a long while, Lucas didn't feel the anger or resentment he had once carried. There was peace in the air, the kind that comes only with time and healing. Lucas continued his life in the new town, his work and relationships thriving. He grew closer to Emily, his mentee, and saw her transform into a confident young woman with a bright future ahead. He also kept in touch with his colleagues and slowly began to open up to new friendships. His past would never be forgotten, but it had become just that, his past. Olivia, on the other hand, found a new path. She had started her own small consulting firm, helping businesses navigate the ethical challenges they faced in the corporate world. Though she didn't seek recognition, her reputation slowly began to shift. People saw the effort she was putting into changing her life, and that made a difference. The story of her betrayal remained a part of her, but she no longer let it define who she was. She had grown into a person she could be proud of, flawed, yes, but determined to do better. As time passed, both Lucas and Olivia found peace. Their paths had diverged, and though their lives would never fully intersect again, they both understood that the most important thing was to move forward. They had learned, each in their own way, that life doesn't wait for anyone, and the only way to survive is to keep moving forward. And so, Lucas found his place in the world, as did Olivia. They each built their own version of happiness, knowing that while their story together had ended, life was full of possibilities, and redemption was always within reach. Months passed, and both Lucas and Olivia were living lives that had shifted considerably from where they had started. The road to healing was neither quick nor smooth, but it was necessary for both of them to find some peace within themselves. Lucas had been busy with his new job, diving deep into his work, which kept him both challenged and fulfilled. But as much as he had grown professionally, the emotional baggage from his past still lingered in quiet moments, when he was alone. He realized that while the pain of his marriage ending would never truly disappear, he had finally made peace with it. On weekends, Lucas enjoyed exploring the town with his new friends. He also found joy in small, everyday moments, sharing a cup of coffee with a colleague, visiting local farmers' markets, or just taking long walks by himself, enjoying the fresh air. He had rediscovered the importance of finding beauty in simplicity. But one day, while checking his inbox, Lucas received an email that would pull him back into the past. It was from Megan. The subject read, "Can we talk?" Lucas hesitated for a moment before opening it. He had never expected to hear from Megan again. The email was brief, but it was clear, Megan was asking for closure. She had gone through her own journey of self-reflection, and after months of silence, she was reaching out to him, perhaps for the last time. The words of the email tugged at his heart in a way he hadn't anticipated. "I know I've hurt you in ways that words can't repair, and I won't ask for forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm not the person I was. I'm doing everything I can to rebuild myself, and I don't expect anything from you other than your understanding. Please know that I think of you often, and I carry regret in my heart for the way I treated you." Lucas sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. It was an unexpected wave of emotion, a reminder of the years they had spent together. But this time, there was no anger. Only sorrow, and maybe a bit of sympathy. He thought about responding, but in the end, he simply closed the email. It wasn't that he didn't care, he had simply come to understand that some things needed to remain in the past. There were no more explanations to be made. Both of them had made their choices, and now they were each walking their own paths. Olivia, too, had been on a similar journey of self-healing. Her consulting business was slowly gaining momentum. She was still haunted by the events of the past, but with every client she helped, every person she mentored, she began to feel a little bit more whole again. In her moments of solitude, she often thought about Lucas, the man who had once been everything to her. She had lost him, yes, but through that loss, she had found herself. She knew that he was living his own life now, and although their relationship was over, she hoped he was happy. She had long ago realized that happiness wasn't a prize you win, it was a journey. One day, as Olivia was walking through a park near her apartment, she bumped into Sarah, Lucas's old friend, the one who had helped him gather evidence about the affair. "Olivia, I didn't expect to see you here," Sarah said with a surprised smile. "How have you been?" Olivia nodded, offering a faint but genuine smile. "I've been doing better. Slowly, but surely. And you?" "I'm doing well," Sarah said, her tone warm but cautious. "It's been a tough year for everyone, I guess." The two women stood in the park for a while, chatting about the past, the present, and the future. Sarah shared how she had witnessed Lucas's transformation. Olivia listened intently, feeling a mixture of pride and regret. There was no bitterness in Sarah's words, only a quiet acceptance of the way things had unfolded. "I know Lucas will be fine," Sarah added, "he's always been strong. And so will you, Olivia. It's just a matter of finding peace with where you are now." Olivia thanked Sarah for the kind words, and as they said goodbye, Olivia realized just how far she had come. She wasn't the same woman who had made those mistakes. She was still imperfect, but she was striving to be better every day. Lucas and Olivia's paths never crossed again in any significant way, but their stories, their journeys, would remain intertwined in the background of their lives. Lucas continued to grow in his work, receiving accolades for his work in education and eventually becoming a key figure in a new initiative to mentor young teachers. He realized that while his personal life had been shattered, it had also given him a unique perspective on how to mentor others, teaching not just academics but life lessons about resilience and the importance of personal growth. Olivia, on the other hand, built her consulting business into something that brought her fulfillment and meaning. She found satisfaction in knowing that she was helping others avoid the same mistakes she had made. She also kept writing, sharing her story of redemption and the lessons she had learned through a blog that resonated with many. Eventually, both Lucas and Olivia found happiness again, though it was no longer intertwined. They had moved on, not just from their marriage, but from the toxic baggage that had once defined them. They had both learned the hard way that life wasn't about perfection, it was about growth. And sometimes, growth came from the hardest lessons. In the end, both of them found peace in their own ways, and that was enough. Lucas found contentment in his new life and his work, and Olivia found healing in her own redemption. The ghosts of their past would always be there, but they no longer haunted them. Instead, they had become the lessons they needed to grow. The story of Lucas and Olivia may have ended in the past, but their futures were still open, full of possibility. Life had a funny way of moving forward, whether they were ready or not, and in their case, they were finally ready. Years passed. Life, with all its ups and downs, continued to unfold. Lucas and Olivia had both grown in ways they couldn't have imagined back in the darkest moments of their past. Their new chapters had allowed them to forge identities independent of their previous relationship, and in many ways, they had evolved into the people they had always hoped to become. One afternoon, as Lucas was preparing for a speaking engagement about the future of education, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, the same Sarah who had been there for him during the darkest moments of his marriage. "Lucas, I know this is out of the blue, but I have something I think you should know." Curiosity piqued, he typed back. "What's going on?" "It's about Olivia. I ran into her today. She's been writing again, about her life. It might be something that you want to see." Lucas paused, the memories flooding back. Olivia had always been an introspective person, and the thought of her writing about their past made him uneasy. Still, he trusted Sarah and felt the need to understand what Olivia was working on. "Thanks, Sarah. I'll check it out." Later that evening, Lucas found himself sitting down at his desk, staring at his computer screen. He hesitated, then clicked on the link Sarah had sent. What he saw was a blog post titled, "The Journey of Redemption, Learning from Mistakes." His heart skipped a beat. Olivia had written openly about the breakdown of their marriage, the pain, and the lessons learned from the mistakes they both made. He read through the entire post in one sitting, recognizing the vulnerability in her words. She had written about how she had failed Lucas, not just as a wife but as a person. Yet, she also spoke of how she had transformed, how she had found purpose in helping others and how she was learning to forgive herself. It was raw, it was painful, and it was real. By the end of the post, Olivia ended with a sentence that struck him deeply. "I may never fully be able to undo the damage I caused, but every day I strive to make amends, not for others, but for myself." Lucas felt a mix of emotions, sadness, pride, and a bittersweet sense of closure. Olivia's journey had not only been about rebuilding herself but also about coming to terms with their shared past. The weight he had carried for years, the anger, the disappointment, it all felt just a little bit lighter now. It wasn't forgiveness he needed, not from Olivia or anyone else. It was understanding. And in that understanding, he realized that their story, while it had been painful, was part of the larger story of both their lives. Olivia's blog continued to gain traction, and soon she was contacted by a publisher who was interested in turning her story into a book. It was a dream she had never considered, but now it felt like the next logical step in her journey. She poured her heart and soul into the book, chronicling her mistakes, her growth, and the path toward healing that she had walked. Meanwhile, Lucas had made significant strides in his own career. The speaking engagements and workshops on education he had been involved with had grown exponentially, and he had found himself in a position to mentor others. His work, though fulfilling, had always been something he used to distract himself from his past, but now, it felt more connected to his values. He continued to live a quieter, more content life. He still had moments where memories of Olivia would creep in, but they no longer brought pain. They brought perspective, a perspective that allowed him to move forward with a sense of peace. One morning, as Lucas was wrapping up a conference call, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Olivia. She had sent him a copy of her book once it was published, with a note. "I wanted you to be one of the first to read this. Thank you for being part of the story, even if it was a painful part. I hope you find peace with it, as I have." Lucas opened the book and read through the first few chapters. It wasn't easy, seeing their life laid bare. But as he read, he saw Olivia's journey not as the end of their marriage but as the beginning of something larger, a personal evolution that made her stronger, wiser, and more empathetic. And perhaps, in her own way, she was showing him how to be the same. As Lucas closed the book, a sense of finality washed over him. He had never expected to get closure from Olivia, but in a way, this book was it. They had both come to terms with their past in their own ways. The wounds of their marriage had been replaced with understanding, and in that space, there was room for something new, a new chapter in both of their lives. The following year, Lucas received an invitation to speak at a panel on personal growth and redemption. It would be a public opportunity for him to share his experiences, both professional and personal, and to show others that even the most painful moments could lead to growth and healing. Before the event, Lucas was surprised to see Olivia in the audience. She had been invited as a guest speaker herself, discussing the lessons of her book. It was strange to see her there, this woman who had once been his everything, now a stranger of sorts, but one he had learned to respect. When their eyes met across the room, there was no anger, no regret. Just acknowledgement. The years had passed, and both of them had found peace. Later that day, they spoke briefly. "You did it, Olivia," Lucas said, smiling warmly. "You found your way." She smiled back. "I think we both did." And with that, the last chapter of their shared history closed, not with resentment, but with understanding. They had each healed in their own way, and now, they could move forward without looking back. The story of Lucas and Olivia wasn't just about love lost or betrayal, it was about growth. It was about how two people could come from the darkest places and emerge stronger, ready for what came next. And although their paths no longer intertwined, their journeys would forever be linked in a way that no time or distance could ever erase. The months after the panel discussion were transformative for both Lucas and Olivia. They had both entered a new phase in their lives, one that was not defined by the past but shaped by the lessons they had learned along the way. Lucas threw himself into his work even more. His speaking engagements had become more frequent, and he started receiving requests for personal consultations from schools and universities around the country. The stories of his personal journey, especially the way he had handled his marriage's breakdown and subsequent healing, resonated with so many people. He became known for his authenticity, and his message of growth through adversity gained him recognition in both the education and personal development sectors. But amidst all the success, Lucas found himself yearning for something else, something more personal. Despite his accomplishments, he felt that there was an emptiness within him, one that he knew could only be filled with meaningful human connection. Meanwhile, Olivia had found her own way. Her book, Learning to Heal, had become a bestseller, and she was invited to speak at universities and seminars around the country. She was approached by mental health professionals and educators who wanted her to join forces with them to spread her message of healing and growth. Though Olivia had been on a path of personal growth for years, the recognition that came with the book's success brought new challenges. Her newfound fame gave her a sense of purpose, but it also led her to feel isolated at times. She was surrounded by people who admired her, but she often wondered if they truly understood the depth of her journey. One afternoon, after a speaking engagement in New York City, Olivia found herself walking through Central Park. It had been a long time since she had felt truly at peace with herself. Even though her career was flourishing and her book was doing well, there was a part of her that missed the quiet moments of introspection. As she strolled through the park, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, a mutual friend who had been there for both her and Lucas during the more challenging times. "Olivia, I know it's been a while, but Lucas is in town for a conference. He mentioned wanting to meet up. Are you open to it?" The thought of seeing Lucas again was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Their brief exchange at the panel had been the most civil interaction they had had in years. She knew they had both changed, but she didn't know if it was possible for them to truly reconnect. She sat on a bench and typed back a simple response, "Sure, why not?" Later that evening, Lucas and Olivia met at a cozy cafe near the park. It was a familiar place, one they had visited years ago when things between them were still good. As they greeted each other, the awkwardness that Lucas had expected was surprisingly absent. They had both been through so much, and yet, the years had softened the edges of their past. There was no anger, no resentment. Just two people who had learned to live without each other but had never forgotten the connection they once shared. "I didn't expect to see you again," Lucas said with a smile, taking a seat across from her. Olivia laughed, a sound that was both familiar and strange. "I didn't think I would see you either. But I guess life has a way of surprising us." The conversation flowed easily, as though no time had passed. They talked about their work, their challenges, and the paths they had taken since the fallout of their marriage. Olivia shared her experiences with the book and how it had impacted her personally. Lucas talked about his speaking engagements and how they had led him to explore deeper connections with his audience. For a while, it felt as though they were simply old friends catching up. There were no deep confessions, no awkward silences. Just two people who had walked very different roads but found themselves meeting again at a crossroads. As the evening drew to a close, neither of them was sure what to expect next. They had shared a meaningful conversation, but there was still a long road ahead. The past was behind them, but the present was full of possibilities. "I've learned a lot since we parted ways," Lucas said as they walked out of the cafe, the evening air crisp and cool. Olivia nodded. "Me too. I've learned that healing is a lifelong process. There's no one moment where everything is fixed. But I've learned to be okay with that." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them comfortable. "I'm glad we met again," Olivia said. "And I'm glad you're in a good place." Lucas smiled. "Same here. I think we both needed to go through what we did. It led us to where we are now." As they parted ways that night, there was no grand gesture. No attempt to rekindle what they once had. Just a mutual understanding that the past had shaped them both in profound ways, but it no longer held them captive. They would always be part of each other's history, but the future was theirs to create on their own. Months passed, and both Lucas and Olivia continued on their individual journeys. Lucas moved to a new city for a fresh start, taking on a role at a prestigious university. Olivia's book had been adapted into a workbook, and she had become a sought-after speaker in the world of personal development. Though their paths rarely crossed, they remained in touch. Sometimes, they exchanged messages of support, wishing each other well in their respective endeavors. Neither one of them was certain what the future held, but they had come to terms with the fact that their stories had become their own. And so, as Lucas looked ahead to the future, a future filled with new challenges and opportunities, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before. He knew that while the past had shaped him, it was the present, and the choices he made now, that would determine who he became. For Olivia, the path was less clear. She had become the woman she had once dreamed of being, but she still carried the weight of her past. The lessons she had learned were never fully behind her, but they had become part of who she was, a woman who had made mistakes, who had grown, and who was still learning. Both of them were moving forward, ready to face whatever came next. The months following their meeting in New York City felt like a blur for both Lucas and Olivia. Each of them had moved forward with their respective lives, but there was always a part of them that remained tethered to the past. It wasn't that they regretted what happened between them, but rather, that their shared history had left an indelible mark on their hearts. Lucas, having relocated to a new city for his role at the university, quickly immersed himself in his work. His career flourished, but a part of him still carried the weight of the unresolved questions that lingered after his marriage ended. He had long since forgiven Olivia, but there were moments, in the quiet of the night, when he wondered what could have been. He had become accustomed to being alone, finding solace in his work and the purpose he had found in inspiring others. Yet, as time passed, a new kind of peace settled over him. The constant ache of the past began to fade. He started to realize that the life he was building wasn't just a product of his career, it was his choice, his design. He wasn't defined by his past mistakes, and he certainly wasn't bound by them. Olivia, on the other hand, had transformed her pain into purpose. Her book Learning to Heal had resonated with thousands, and her speaking engagements were more than just professional milestones, they were opportunities to connect, to heal alongside others who had experienced similar heartbreaks. Despite the success, however, Olivia couldn't help but feel the loneliness that sometimes crept in at night. She missed the companionship, the partnership, but most of all, she missed the idea of truly being seen by someone. Her marriage to Lucas had been an intense part of her life, and despite the pain, it had also been filled with moments of joy and discovery. She had often found herself reflecting on those moments, wondering if she would ever experience that level of connection again. But as the months passed, Olivia began to realize something: she no longer needed to rely on someone else to define her happiness. She had spent so long trying to understand her own worth through the lens of a relationship that she had forgotten to explore who she was on her own. The self-discovery process, though uncomfortable at times, brought her a sense of clarity. She wasn't the same person she had been when she and Lucas parted ways, and she was proud of the woman she had become. There was still work to do, but Olivia was ready to take on whatever came next. She had grown stronger, not in spite of her past, but because of it. One quiet afternoon, a year after their reunion in New York, Olivia found herself at a conference in Chicago. As she stepped into the venue, she couldn't shake the feeling of déjà vu. The last time she had been here, it was for a different kind of conference, a different kind of life. To her surprise, as she made her way through the crowd, she saw him. Lucas. He was standing by the registration desk, speaking with a group of attendees. For a moment, they both froze, as if time had momentarily bent. Olivia could see the same familiar expression on his face, the quiet strength, the hint of warmth in his eyes, but with something else now, a piece that had been absent during their years together. She took a deep breath and walked over, uncertain of what to expect. Lucas, she said softly, her voice betraying a mixture of surprise and curiosity. He turned, his eyes widening for a moment before softening. Olivia. I didn't expect to see you here. Neither of them knew what to say at first. The years between them had passed, but the space they once shared still lingered. I guess we both found our way to this place, Olivia said after a pause, offering a small smile. Lucas nodded. It seems like the world has a funny way of bringing people back together, doesn't it? They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had been through. A silent understanding that the past was the past, and it was time to move forward. I'm glad to see you doing well, Lucas said, breaking the silence. Same here, Olivia replied. I'm happy for you, Lucas. They exchanged a brief but meaningful look, and for the first time in years, it felt like they were truly seeing each other again. Not as ex-spouses, but as people who had changed and grown, who had been through difficult things but were now standing on the other side. As they parted ways that day, neither of them knew what the future held, but they were at peace with it. They weren't destined to be together again, but they were okay with that. They had learned the most important lesson: sometimes, the love you need the most is the one you give to yourself. Years passed, and both Lucas and Olivia continued their individual journeys. They still crossed paths occasionally, at conferences, speaking engagements, or mutual friends gatherings. Each time, the encounter felt lighter, less complicated. They had found a way to be part of each other's lives without being bound by the past. For Lucas, the future was full of possibilities. He had become a mentor to countless students and had even begun teaching a course on resilience and personal growth. His work with troubled youth had become his life's calling, and he had started a non-profit organization dedicated to providing support for those overcoming trauma. Olivia, too, had found her calling. She had become a voice for those who were learning to heal from broken relationships and had developed workshops that were widely praised for their depth and authenticity. She had also written a second book, one that explored the complexities of self-love and personal transformation. And though neither of them had a perfect life, they had found peace in knowing that they had created something meaningful with the time they had. They were no longer defined by the past, but rather by the strength they had found within themselves to move forward. The story of their love was just one chapter in a much larger narrative, and they both knew that their journey was far from over. Each day was a new beginning, a chance to discover who they could become, and who they could help along the way. As the years went by, Lucas and Olivia both continued to touch lives in ways they never imagined possible. Their story wasn't one of grand resolutions or dramatic twists, it was a story of growth, acceptance, and healing. In the end, they were no longer the people they had once been, and that was the most important thing of all. And so, as the story of Lucas and Olivia comes to a close, we're reminded that life isn't about the perfect ending, but about the strength to begin again. Sometimes, we need to lose ourselves to find who we really are. And when we do, we discover that the greatest love of all is the love we give to ourselves. We hope their journey inspired you, reminded you that no matter what you've gone through, healing and growth are always possible. The road to recovery might not always be easy, but it's worth every step. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, comment, and share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear your own experiences and reflections, whether it's about love, loss, or the strength to move forward. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story that speaks to the heart. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story. Until then, take care of yourself, and keep growing.